Hey everybody, we're here with Brian Thomas, longtime newsman, most recently of the AP News Bureau in Washington, D.C. And our topic is whether or not the news media is becoming too partisan and losing its objectivity in pursuit of political agendas. And case in point is the Hunter Biden laptop, the story of which has been squelched by most of the media, both on the networks and also in the internet. Bryant, what do you think of that? Is objectivity in reporting becoming a thing of the past and being approved by most of the media not to be objective in pursuit of social justice?
Well, I don't know if it's that involved, but I do think that every side in the media now has got a stake in uh, performing for its core audience, and that
Mhm.
includes the right wing as well as the left wing.
Right.
So anytime you find something that's a hot button issue for one side, you're automatically going to get catcalls from the other.
Yeah, but I mean, it's reached a new height or low, hasn't it, where they actually stopped the purveying of that Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York Post came out with it. The FBI is in possession of it. And the Biden campaign has not denied that it's Hunter's laptop. They haven't denied the authenticity of the emails contained within it. And they haven't said that there was no meeting with a foreign official who was trying to curry favor through Hunter Biden to get a meeting with Joe Biden in order to influence policy. And this hasn't been denied either. So, what do you make of that, the shutdown of this? Now, it's one thing to have both sides being in the tank for one candidate or another. That's nothing new. But to shut down a story like that, where nobody could actually see the story and decide whether it's authentic or whether it's phony, I mean, that is a new dimension now. And to me, it bodes nothing good for the future. What do you think?
Well, I think it's definitely not going to help the cause of independent journalism, whether it's this story or some other one. Um, One of the problems we have here is that this campaign is so polarized. This campaign is so toxic that we run into the problem of not being able to judge objectively what should be a good story and what should not. This is not the first time we've run into this sort of thing. Maybe not to this degree with the suppression of the story, but certainly all kinds of controversial stories have come up in this campaign that would never have been a second thought in terms of a story choice in years past. So I don't know how to answer your question. I think it's a threat. Whether it's going to inhibit the free flow of journalistic effort, I don't know. It's too early for that.
Well, Brian, another concern, an added concern is that, as we both know, people are tending away from newspapers now. A lot of the news is consumed electronically, the network television, radio, and especially now the internet. Now, the CEOs of the three main purveyors of information and news, Google, Twitter, and Facebook, were all hauled before a Senate committee this week. Actually, it was voluntary before they were subpoenaed to ask why they were preventing the reposting of that New York Post story on Hunter Biden. And they came up with, I thought, were all kinds of weak excuses, and they're claiming they're not really censoring that, but they certainly are. They would not allow social media to repost that story. Now, considering how compromised the rest of the media already is and how partisan, for these CEOs now to decide which stories are accurate, which ones are not, which ones we're allowed to see, which ones are not. I mean, where do you go from here? We already know that, what is it, six giant corporations control 90% of the electronic media and newspapers. And now, with the internet under their control, how do we get any kind of information, whether true or false, so we could decide for ourselves? Where is this heading?
Well, I think what happened with the three social media companies that you talked about was the criticism they had undergone from the left for not taking some of the tweets, for instance, of President Trump, and allowing all of the falsehoods that were contained in them to go unchallenged, to go out there in social media form and for discussion, even when there wasn't a shred of truth to it. And I think they were under a lot of pressure to change that method of allowing unbridled access to Twitter to do something about it. And you saw some of that happen. So perhaps this is a swing in the other direction, perhaps too far. We still don't know because we don't know the whole story about this Biden exchange.
Brian, the tweets from the president, whether they're true or not, it's the president of the United States. Put it out there. If you want to put up some challenge to its accuracy, that's fine. But let it out there. Let it be tweeted. To shut it down entirely. Where does it stop? Then how do we know what else they're shutting down? I mean, this is the death of objective journalism. It's the death of the kind of public information we need to maintain a democracy, and what Thomas Jefferson warned about when they put in the First Amendment. I mean, to me, this is an immense danger to sustaining a democratic government. Jefferson said, in order to you need an educated public, or a public that has information, in order for democracy to survive. Franklin said that as well. We're at a point now where they're deciding what we could see and what we can't see. Whether it's true or not, it should be out there for discussion. I mean, to me, this is an extreme, ominous trend that's going to result in state news. It's going to be ministries of propaganda. Don't you agree, as a longtime news person?
Well, I don't see it that far along yet. I think that here's my first take on this. And I think that when Donald Trump is no longer in the White House, normalcy will probably return to journalism. He's so toxic in terms of putting out falsehoods that so many people in the media are so tired of being burned by everything that comes out of the White House as being inaccurate that they feel that they're just being a puppet for this person in power.
Brian,
So I think,
what I think will happen if Biden becomes president, it's not going to be a return to normalcy in journalism. They're going to continue being cheerleaders, and they'll continue to suppress anything negative towards Biden and the Democrats. I mean, they're already having at it. They've already established this pattern,
well,
and it's being justified even by schools of journalism, college professors. For instance, Stanford Communications professor Ted Glasser has said that objectivity in reporting, it's too restraining for journalists seeking social justice. Therefore, that should no longer be a goal to have objectivity in reporting. What kind of craziness is this from a journalism professor? 10 years ago, a guy like that would be considered a nutcase and locked up in an institution. Now, this is becoming mainstream information, a mainstream meme that should be the norm. I mean, this is insane.
well, I don't see it as I said, as far along as you do. It concerns me, but I think the toxicity of the Trump administration is what is at the base of this. And when it's gone, I think much of the many of the things that you're complaining about will go with it.
I don't think so. I think just the opposite, Brian. Also, this increasing tendency to sanitize the news, to use euphemisms. For instance, even the AP Stylebook. You were at the AP network in bureau in Washington, D.C. Now, political correct changes in the AP Stylebook recently. Riots are now to be called unrest. And protest, just the word protest, can now include violent demonstrations. Now, what they're doing is sanitizing the news to create this aura that all this disruption, all this social unrest is really, just a form of protest. I mean, again, the AP Stylebook, which people rely on across the nation, all kinds of news organizations follow the AP Stylebook, and they're being more and more politically correct. How dangerous is that?
Well, having worked at the AP for a long time, I can tell you that changes to the style book don't come easily. It stayed the same for almost all of the 15 years that I was at AP. And I can tell you that if there has been a change, like the one you mentioned, it has not come about without much consternation within the AP itself.
But it's come about.
It's still come about. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It means it's different from what we saw before.
Well,
it may upset you, but it obviously there's a calling for that sort of thing among media members who are the AP.
there's a calling for it, but is that a correct call, or is it more political correctness and more partisanship? Now, how can you justify using the word simply protest to include but not mention the violent demonstration component of that? So we have a protest. It's going on right now in Philadelphia because a black man with a knife approaching the cops was shot dead by him. Now that's turned into widespread looting and rioting. Should that just be tossed off as unrest and protest? This is what they're doing and reporting it. I mean, to me, Brian, this is so much propagandistic. This is what regimes that have suppressed their populations by suppressing information. This is what this increasingly smacks of. Where does it stop? And how come more people, more journalists, instead of going along with it, are saying, "Whoa, wait a minute. Once we start doing that, where does it end? And who's to control the narrative? Who's going to control the information so we can make up our own mind?" I mean, I don't see any justification for this.
The Philadelphia thing is like many of the other incidents involving the shooting deaths of black men by police. There was no reason, and Philadelphia police officials have come around to this in full circle, for someone who was holding a knife to be shot dead. Shoot to wound. You don't have to shoot to kill. And that's the problem. And that's why you see such reaction in the black community, because no one gets a second chance. They get shot and killed first. That's the first choice of many of these cops.
All right,
and that's the wrinkle.
There should be retraining. I agree. But in this case, from what I could see, the guy was closing fast. The cops had to decide quickly. And so now I've also heard, I don't know if this is completely accurate, but because of the move to defund and defang the police in Philadelphia, they took away their pepper sprays, they took away their tasers, because they felt the police were using them too readily. So therefore, the cops are left just with their service revolvers to stop a threat like that. But without even getting into whether that was justified or not, whether getting into, it should be retrained, not to shoot to kill necessarily. Without getting into that, who was right, who was wrong. Here, the situation was that clearly this was used by those who wanted to riot and loot. I mean, you could see the video. They're using hand trucks to carry out these items. There's a report that there was somebody rented a U-Haul, a rental truck, to haul away stuff. You could see people breaking into these stores at will, hauling away huge armfuls, truck cart loads full of merchandise. The cops are just standing by because they've been told to let them do it rather than confront them or arrest them to any extent. So again, we're getting back to whatever the right or wrong was about that guy being shot dead who was approaching them with a knife. How do you justify this kind of looting, but by people who took advantage of that situation, and just to call it unrest?
I don't justify it at all. Vice President Biden hasn't justified it at all.
Lately, yeah, he's been coming out because he knows that the
look. Let's say it for what it is. In 2020, the candidate says that's not acceptable. Looting and burning is not acceptable.
He said it late, after the polls were showing that they were taking a hit by not condemning the rioting. For a long time, he didn't say a damn thing about it.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion.
It's a fact. It's a fact.
It's more opinion than fact. But that's not my issue. My issue is, if you're going to have a well-informed public, all of the sides have to be presented. You're correct in that regard.
Exactly.
But that doesn't mean one side gets to pontificate, as they do on Fox, for instance, at the exclusion of anybody who's got anything on the left to say. And that's what the problem is here. That's where the balance has started to go tilt.
Right.
And that's why you see so much on the other side countering what's going on with Fox.
Brian, we agree. Fox started this trend, the niche audience approach. They knew they could get a big audience of conservatives. They didn't have to get everybody. Then the other networks saw that that formula was working, so they became just as doctrinaire, just as much with an agenda. Both sides are doing it. I don't agree with that, but what I'm saying is the overall concern here is letting information out of any nature of both sides and letting the public decide. If Fox shouldn't be doing that, CNN shouldn't be doing that on the other end of the spectrum. We agree on that. But what I'm saying is now it's taken on a point where journalists feel justified in suppressing information that they don't agree with, even if it's false information. Put it out there, let the public decide. Have point, counterpoint, have arguments, ridicule what you consider absurd or false, but let it be posted. The New York Post article on Hunter Biden, you didn't even know about it until I told you about it, because unless you're watching Fox, you don't know that that story even exists. That's a disservice to the public.
I'm not disputing that. All I'm disputing is the fact that we make decisions, and you and I did this years ago when we worked together in Connecticut.
Right.
You and I make decisions based upon our gut instinct and our experience about what is newsworthy and what is not. That hasn't changed. At least it should not have changed. And maybe to this degree, it becomes more hot button oriented. I agree with you there. But that doesn't mean we don't make subjective decisions about which stories are news and which are not.
Right. Newsworthiness is one thing. Suppressing information is another. We would make choices on whether what the council, what the aldermen in Connecticut, they're called aldermen, what they decided at a meeting in terms of what the next tax rate would be, as opposed to covering maybe a story on the sale of Girl Scout cookies. So the aldermanic decision would take precedence as newsworthiness if it wasn't a slow news day. But what I'm saying is newsworthiness is not the same as making subjective judgments about what the public should hear and see. Let them disagree with it. Let it be subject to criticism, ridicule. Let it be subject to all kinds of analysis. But let that information get out. Otherwise, where does this stop? Just what's considered politically correct or what's considered helpful to a candidate that you support or a party that you support. This is reaching a stage now where raw information itself is being suppressed. That's the real danger. Fox is one extreme. They shouldn't do it. CNN has become the other extreme. They shouldn't do it. But at least let both sides get information out and don't suppress a story which the New York Post had out, and it can't be retweeted. It can't be reposted on Facebook. It's being suppressed by these social media sites. They are now the arbiters of what the public should be allowed to see.
Well, that's always been the case, and it started with newspaper publishers who just look at William Loeb up here in New Hampshire with the Manchester Union Leader. He
Right.
got away with that for years. So it isn't the first time this has been done.
Yeah, but in the old days, there was more of a variety. One newspaper would be highly Republican, another one may be Democratic, although William Loeb in Manchester, New Hampshire had a monopoly on the state, the only big newspaper there. But at least there were other counterbalances to that. Now, with the consolidation, which you know a lot about, the consolidation of the media, that law that they passed, 6 big corporations already control most of the news content, and now with the internet becoming a censor, where do you go from there to get any kind of raw information to decide for yourself?
One of the things that bothers me is that if you have all of these individual companies, and 6 of them, in lockstep with efforts to bridle the news or to channel it so that it only presents one point of view, then I have a problem with that. If there's just one or two incidences of that, such as the story that we're talking about tonight, then that's not a trend. So I want to wait to see how much more of this goes on before I'm ready to put up a red flag.
Right. Yeah. This was perhaps the most extreme example yet. However, suppression of information politically has been going on for a long time on the internet through those algorithms, where I know firsthand that you search for a story that's out of the mainstream narrative. It's buried way the heck down. You've got to search for it page after page after page, or it disappears altogether. That's what they've been doing for quite a while now with these social media sites, with Google and other internet sites. And now, again, they got away with that, and now not to repost an investigative report by the fourth largest newspaper in the country, the New York Post, whether it's biased or not, it's a major story, and then nobody is asking Joe Biden if it's true. Let him say no, it's not true. It's all hogwash. The only thing he said dismissively and very vaguely is, "Oh, it's just a smear campaign." But he hasn't been asked any specific questions like, "Is that your son's laptop? Are those emails contained within the laptop authentic? And did you meet with a foreign national to arrange a business deal through your son?" All he has to do is say no. But they're not even asking those questions. This is what I'm saying. It's already reached an extreme level that should be disturbing to everybody. Ask the questions, let them deny it. But they're not even raising that. It's like the story doesn't exist.
Well, I think
and
in the next 5 days, maybe we'll find out.
And they've certainly gone with other stories detrimental to Trump on much less verification. So therefore, the imbalance is obvious, and it's getting worse. I mean, as journalists, both of us.
Look, Trump is his own worst enemy. Every time he opens his mouth, he says something that is so outrageous that more and more people have decided they're going to pull away, and the numbers show that in the polls.
That's fine.
So
that's fine.
So if you take that to its logical conclusion, then you can see the body politic of the country moving away from him, and with it, the coverage that is part of that.
Look, so then let him hang himself by making ridiculous statements, and let the public see that and move away from him. Don't deny the public the coverage of whatever he says and the coverage of a story involving Joe Biden's son Hunter. I mean, to me, Brian, this is outrageous. If Biden gets in, it's going to continue even worse. We're going to see one side of the news, whatever the media decides they want the public to hear. And we've both been journalists for most of our adult lives. To me, this is extremely disturbing. Wrap it up. You have the last word.
The last word, I think, is as long as Fox News is around, you're going to have the other side stepping up and saying, "Wait a minute, we don't have to do this." And I think that's going to ultimately be the check and balance.
All right, and you think it's all going to go away once Biden becomes president?
I don't think it's all going to go away. I think the level of toxicity will diminish greatly if Biden is elected.
And objectivity will be restored to journalism.
Over time. Not immediately, but over time.
All right. Brian Thomas, longtime friend of mine, although you might doubt it tonight with our exchange. And we're both longtime journalists. We started out years ago. At least I started out years ago in Connecticut. You were already established there. Learned a lot from you. And, it's been a good friendship over the years. And we'll have more of this debate back and forth with Brian Thomas, a longtime newsman, formerly, most recently, the AP News Bureau in Washington, D.C. Bryant, thanks for joining us.
You bet.